My name was Sister Miriam before the silence took root. Now, people just call me Agatha. Before the heart stopped and before he came, I lived in a forgotten convent nestled in the snow-heavy woods of Vermont. You wouldn't find it on any recent map. The locals called it the Vale, half mocking, half whispering, like something they'd rather forget. It sat there, crumbling under white winters, with its stained glass eyes watching the forest like it was waiting for something to return. I was 20 when I took the Vale. My parents thought it was dramatic, said I was running from something. They weren't wrong. I just didn't know what. I only knew that the silence of the world called to me more than the noise of it. Now I'm 39. And I died in February. It was the sort of cold that doesn't just enter your skin but folds into your bones, wraps around your organs, and waits. That night, I felt it differently. There was no pain, no warning. I simply woke up and knew I had died. There was no sound, not even the usual creaks of the old wooden beams above my bunk, nor the wind sliding across the windows. Just this, absolute stillness. Like time had stopped breathing. And then the walls began to bleed light. Not metaphorically, literally. White, thread-like rays slid down the cracked stone like veins bursting with some divine essence. My body didn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even blink. I watched the light spread across the floor toward my cot, slow and deliberate. And then I fell, inward. Not through space. Not through time. Through self. Imagine every layer of memory, ego, emotion, peeling away, one by one, until you're just awareness. A speck in the dark. And then he was there. Not the Jesus from icons, not the soft, shepherd-eyed man I'd prayed to for 19 years. He was tall, but undefined, as if form couldn't hold him. His face shimmered between beauty and terror. His eyes, oh God, his eyes, they weren't eyes at all, but mirrors. Perfect, circular, reflective voids that showed me not myself, but what I never wanted to see. He spoke without speaking. Words crawled into my mind like old roots growing in reverse. And then he told me. You are not dead yet. But you have trespassed. You've touched the edge. Now I must show you 3 things. Things never meant for those who still breathe. I tried to speak, to pray, even. But prayer felt like a broken tool in that place. Like trying to hammer air. All I could do was listen. The first thing he showed me. But no. That comes later. This is not a story for comfort. This is not testimony to strengthen faith. This is an infection. And it begins with death, mine, in a place that still smells like snow and incense. And the moment I came back, I knew I brought something with me. When I woke up, if you can even call it that, my body was cold, but my mind was burning. I was lying on the stone floor outside the dormitory corridor. Not in my cot. No blanket, no memory of walking. Just frost under my palms and the distinct scent of iron, not blood, but something older. The kind of iron that comes from beneath the ground. Rusted and wet. Earth blood. Sister Catherine found me before dawn. She didn't scream. She didn't even blink. Just stared at me like I had brought something back with me, something she had once seen, and worked her whole life to forget. You weren't breathing, she said, her voice brittle. For almost 6 minutes. She didn't ask how I got there. She didn't ask what happened. Because the look in my eyes told her. I had crossed some kind of line. And I hadn't come back alone. For the next few days, I felt detached, like I was still floating, watching my body operate from a few inches outside my skull. Every prayer felt hollow. Every psalm, rehearsed. The words didn't reach wherever I had gone. Because wherever that was, it had no use for words. That's when the dreams began. Not nightmares. Invitations. Always the same dream. I was walking through the woods behind the convent, barefoot, the snow melting beneath my feet though the air remained bitter. The trees were too tall. Not the kind that grow from soil, the kind that seem placed. Ancient. Watching. Eventually I'd reach a clearing. And in the center of that clearing was a door. Not attached to a house. Not part of any building. Just a single wooden door, standing upright in the snow, frame cracked, no knob, nailed shut with what looked like blackened thorns. Each night, I got closer. The fifth night, I touched it. And I heard something move on the other side. Something that recognized me. When I woke, my fingernails were dirty. Packed with black soil. That was when I began to write this. Not as confession. That concept feels laughable now. But as record. Because the things he showed me, the three truths, they are unraveling reality around me. And if I don't tell someone, I fear I'll forget who I am entirely. Or worse, remember who I was before. You see, that door? It's not a metaphor. It's real. And I think I left it open. The night it happened, I didn't sleep, not really. It was past midnight, and the wind had turned. The old pines behind the convent bent toward the building, like something was drawing them in. I sat in the chapel, alone, with only one candle lit. I watched the flame flicker, but it didn't move with the air. It moved like it was breathing. Something in the shadows behind the altar shifted, not visibly, but emotionally, spiritually. As if the room's memory stirred and remembered I didn't belong anymore. That's when the silence broke. Not with sound, with presence. The temperature dropped, but not in the usual way. It wasn't cold so much as the absence of life. The wood no longer creaked. The mice stopped their scratchings behind the walls. Even my own heartbeat, I couldn't feel it anymore. It was like the world had paused to let something through. And then I was there again. Not physically. I don't know how to describe it except to say, I blinked, and I was no longer in the chapel. I was beneath something, not underground, but beneath understanding. It was a space not meant for flesh. It pulsed with thought, but no language. He was there. The one I met the first time. The one with the mirror eyes. Jesus, or what we call Jesus. But this wasn't the savior of paintings. This was the source. Not comfort, truth. And truth does not comfort. Truth burns. He showed me the first thing. The first truth, sin was never yours. What he meant, and what I felt, was shattering. I saw time unfold not as a line, but a knot. A tangled, breathing mass of choices and echoes, all spiraling from something deeper. Deeper than humanity. Deeper than Eden. Sin didn't begin with man. Sin began with observation. Before there was evil, there was witness. Some original gaze that looked at the void and named it wrong. And in naming it, shaped it. Twisted it. We inherited the residue. Not punishment. Not guilt. But infection. I saw the garden. Not a place, but a concept. A failed quarantine zone. Humanity wasn't exiled from Eden, Eden was closed. Because we brought something in with us. Something contagious. We never ate the fruit because we were hungry for knowledge. We ate it because something in us wanted to change the world just by looking at it, like they once did. And God, the real one, not the one in our stories, wept. Not for our failure. But because we had touched something older than creation. I was shaking when I came back. My nose was bleeding. My hands were raw. And in my mouth, I tasted ash. Not metaphorically. Real ash. Like something burned, and I had swallowed the smoke. On the chapel wall behind the altar, carved into the stone, something that wasn't there before. One phrase, in Latin. Video ergo perit mundus. I see, therefore the world perishes. I haven't told anyone. Because I think if I say it out loud, whatever I saw will hear me. And then the second truth will come before I'm ready. But I feel it coming anyway. like breath on the back of my neck. The second truth came slowly. It didn't erupt like the first, it leaked in. Through cracks in the air. Through shadows that stayed too long. Through numbers that repeated themselves when they shouldn't have. It started with the clocks. All of them, analog, digital, even the broken grandfather clock in the hallway that hadn't moved in decades, began to stop at exactly 3:33 a.m. I would wake each night at that hour, without fail. At first, I thought it was just trauma. My body, remembering. But it wasn't just me. Sister Clara mentioned in passing that she hadn't slept well. She said she kept waking when it was all threes. Her eyes were gray with exhaustion, but her voice held something else, fear she hadn't admitted to herself yet. One night, I decided not to sleep at all. I sat on my bed, eyes wide in the dark, watching the numbers on my old digital clock flick upward. 3:30. 3:31. 3:32. The moment it clicked to 3:33, the air in the room changed. Not colder. Heavier. Like something stepped in. I didn't hear it. I felt it. A pressure. A presence just beside my bed, watching me, not with anger, not with love. With curiosity. The kind a child might have staring at a spider pinned beneath glass. I turned my head slowly. There was nothing there. But my reflection in the window wasn't mine. It looked like me. But the eyes were wrong. They weren't following my movements. They stared through me, at something behind. Something I couldn't see, but my reflection could. And it smiled. The next morning, I found bruises on my arms. Finger-shaped. I stopped sleeping after that. I wandered the convent halls at night, wrapped in my old wool habit, whispering prayers I didn't believe anymore. I wasn't looking for safety. I was looking for consistency. Something stable in a place that had begun to bend inward. It was in the East Wing, the one sealed after the fire years ago, where I finally heard his voice again. Not aloud. Inside the stone. Inside the walls. The second truth, he whispered, like cracked bells in deep water. There are no demons. Only the things that answer when we call them that. I didn't understand, not fully. Not then. But as I stood there, hand against the cold ash-marked wall, I felt something on the other side. Something old, not evil, at least, not in the way we think. It felt like curiosity wearing hunger as a mask. We gave it a name. We gave it fear. And that's what called it forth. We'd been praying to locks and naming the keys as devils. And I opened one of those locks the night I died. Not with a spell. Not with ritual. But with attention. Because attention is permission. And once something knows it's being seen, it comes closer. That was the second truth. I haven't turned off the lights in my room since. But I know light won't stop it. Because it doesn't live in the dark. It lives in the knowing. The convent keeps secrets the way lungs keep air. It doesn't mean to. It's just built that way. Most of the others don't wander the East Wing. Not since the fire. I remember the story they told us, a lightning strike, faulty wiring, divine misfortune, pick one. But the truth was simpler, and harder, someone had burned themselves alive. Not in protest. Not in madness. In warning. That part they left out. But something I don't remember choosing, pulled me there again, past the blackened doors and split beams, to the old library. I had no lantern. The light seemed to follow me anyway. The air still stank of char and mildew, but beneath it was something worse, clove oil. The kind used in embalming. Someone had tried to cover death with sweetness. That's when I found the journal. It was beneath a fallen crucifix, wedged into the hollow behind a cracked stone. Burned around the edges, but intact. The leather was marked with a name I recognized only distantly, like a word you forget until someone else says it, Sister Dolores Ives. No one had spoken her name in years. She was the one who died in the fire. Or so I thought. The entries were unstable, written in a hand that started elegant and grew feral over time, like thought unraveling into instinct. Some pages were torn out violently. Some written backwards, as if mirrored by force. But one line appeared again and again, scratched into margins, borders, even over other words. She never died. She changed rooms. I read that line over and over until the words lost meaning. But something in me understood. Dolores wasn't consumed in flame. She was placed somewhere. Contained. There's a practice in certain medieval orders, excommunication by entombment. They wall the nun in, brick by brick, with a small slit for communion until the body or soul breaks first. It was outlawed centuries ago. But old places, don't forget old methods. Later that night, I pressed my ear to the far wall of the library. And I heard it. Not voices. Not cries. Breathing. Soft. Rhythmic. Like someone asleep. Or pretending. And underneath, scratching. As if fingers, long dead, still sought exit or prayer. I reported none of this. Who would listen? Sister Clara already avoided me. The others whispered now when I entered a room, not out of cruelty, but fear, as if they smelled something on me that didn't belong in the land of the living. And they're right. Because I am bringing something back with me. Each time he shows me more, I carry it like dust in the folds of my thoughts. I feel it under my nails. I taste it in my food. The truths are not revelations. They are spores. And I'm beginning to wonder if Dolores wasn't buried alive to punish her. But to keep her from finishing something. Because last night, in a dream that wasn't a dream, she spoke to me, not through words, but through the wall. She said, "He's lying to you. What you're seeing? It's only the outer skin." It was the third night in a row I dreamed of Dolores. She never appears fully, just fragments. Her veil, stained with something that isn't blood but moves like it. Her hands, skin flaking like wet parchment. Her eyes, wide and milk-colored, staring from behind some unseen slit in stone. She never blinks. And every night, she whispers something new. Not like a ghost trying to haunt, but like a prisoner trying to warn. "You're listening to the wrong one," she said. "He shows you truths that point away from him. Ask why he needs you to see. Ask what's beneath his face." I woke with my mouth full of dust. That day, Sister Clara vanished. No one said the word missing. But her absence clung to the air like mildew. She was the only one left who still made eye contact with me. Even then, only in glimpses, like someone peering across a ledge. Her things were still in her room, rosary draped across the mirror, an open Bible on the bed, flipped to Revelation. But the last thing she touched was the chapel door handle, smudged with something dark. I felt it before I saw it. Not blood. Charcoal. The same black, oily soot that stained the east wing, and the same color I'd begun coughing up each morning. She hadn't left. She'd been taken sideways, into something that moves behind this world, like a second skin pulling tighter. That night, I returned to the woods. To that place in my dreams, the clearing where the door stood. But this time, it was different. It had moved. It wasn't in the clearing anymore. I found it near the cemetery wall, between two crumbling cherub statues. No frame, no hinges. Just the door, upright, leaning slightly as if waiting for a knock. This time it wasn't nailed shut. It was ajar. Only a few inches. But from that darkness, something breathed, long, slow, and patient. I should have run. But I stepped closer. There was no handle. No markings. But as I touched the wood, it was warm, pulsing. Like skin stretched too tightly over something trying to get out. And I heard his voice again. But not inside me this time. From the other side of the door. Muffled. Choked. struggling. Don't trust him. That's not me. My legs gave out. I fell to my knees in the frost, eyes wide, breath stolen from my chest. Because that voice, strained, broken, real, it sounded like the one I had known as a child. The voice I had prayed to. The one that once comforted. And it was pleading. He wears me like a mask. I haven't told the sisters. Not anymore. I see how they look at me now, like I've become something contagious. But something's changed in me since I touched the door. The candlelight bends when I enter rooms. Mirrors no longer show just my face. And when I close my eyes, I don't see darkness anymore. I see eyes, thousands, staring from within walls, water, stone, silence. Watching. Waiting. Because the real third truth is coming. And I think it's the one that breaks you. I hadn't heard that name in decades. Agatha. No one here uses it. Not since I took my vows. That name belonged to someone else, someone before obedience, before silence, before the veil. But he said it with such calm, such certainty, that I nearly dropped the communion tray. He wasn't part of the congregation. In fact, he didn't belong anywhere near the convent. Tall. Sun-worn skin. Eyes the color of storm-touched lakes. Dressed in gray wool, though the heat pressed heavy against the chapel glass. No one else seemed to notice him. Not Sister Maria, who passed him in the hall. Not the groundskeeper, who watered the roses just 3 feet away. Only I could see him. And he knew. He smiled, not cruelly, not kindly. Knowingly. You opened it, didn't you? It's always the quiet ones. The ones who crave silence the most. They think it's peace. But really, it's permission. I asked who he was. He didn't answer. He only tilted his head and said, "You were born remembering." And something inside me cracked. Because I had remembered things, even as a child, faces I'd never seen, symbols I'd draw in the margins of my notebooks that no one could explain. A spiral made of eyes. A flame shaped like a hand. A woman with her mouth sewn shut, kneeling before a mirror that showed her without skin. The nuns had called them dreams. My mother had called them burdens. But this man, this thing in a man's shape, called them memories. He handed me something wrapped in waxed cloth. I didn't want to touch it. But my hands moved anyway. Inside was a shard of marble, about the size of a child's fist. Smooth, except for a red line curling across it. The line moved. I blinked. And for a split second, I wasn't in the chapel. I was in a circular room. Underground. The walls alive with whispers, not voices, but intentions. A ritual was beginning. And I recognized the girl on the altar. It was me. But younger. Not yet born. The man's voice echoed again, but without sound. They started it before you arrived. You are not the first body for this. You're just the first one who lasted. I dropped the stone. It hit the marble floor and didn't bounce. It melted through. Gone. That night, the statue of Mary in the east hallway began to bleed. Not from the eyes. From the palms, but in reverse, the blood pulling into her wounds instead of flowing out. Like time rewinding. Like the suffering was being reabsorbed. The younger sisters began fasting and praying. They think it's a sign of mercy. But I know better. It means something is feeding. And I think I know where that door goes now. Not to hell. Hell is too recent. This is older. Colder. Hungrier. And the third truth? He's saving that one for when I'm ready to forget who I really am. It started with a whisper in Latin, spoken by someone with no mouth. I was in the chapel again, alone, or so I thought. The candles burned low, but refused to go out, as if the flames were listening. That's when I heard it. A scratch. Then another. Coming from the confessional. I approached, slow. The air around it felt wrong, not cold, not warm, just thick, like breathing through soaked cloth. I pulled the curtain aside and found a shape kneeling in the dark. It didn't look up. It didn't breathe. It was made of bone. Not skeletal, not medical, carved. Every inch of the figure was etched with symbols, old Latin prayers, forbidden psalms, binding rites, and something else, older, angular, whispering as my eyes moved across it. And in its hand, a small femur, sharpened into a stylus. At its feet, a slab of ivory, roughly the size of a tombstone. Words scratched deep into the surface. Confiteor anti-flesh. I confessed before I was flesh. The markings continued down in a spiral, descending like a drill into time. I began to read them aloud before realizing my lips were moving on their own. And then the name appeared. Father Elijah Dorn. The founder. I'd read about him as a postulant. Built this convent in 1863. Allegedly died of illness 2 years later. Canonized in local legend as a man of fierce vision and miraculous calm. But the bone figure spoke with his voice. Not out loud. Inside my chest. I did not die. They sealed me in the hollow chapel. Beneath the stone heart. Because I saw what waits when the last prayer is spoken backward. I staggered out of the confessional, bile in my throat. Behind me, the bone figure collapsed, not like a statue, but like skin losing memory. It dissolved into ash. The confessional was empty again. That night, I searched the old convent records. Most were missing or burned, but I found a torn page from an early registry. Beside Elijah Dorn's name was a handwritten note in red ink. His blood still sings when the bells toll. We stopped ringing them after she came. Agatha. My hand froze. They'd written my name. Long before I was born. I've stopped trying to understand time the way we're taught. In this place, time isn't a line. It's a wheel. And someone's been turning it backward. Feeding it memory, prayer, bone, and silence. The third truth, I think, isn't an idea. It's a process. And I can feel it finishing itself, inside me. The convent was colder than usual. Not the usual drafty chill, but a silence that swallowed sound before it could form. Even the candles shivered, their flames fighting to stay alive. And then she appeared. Sister Clara. But she was changed. Her eyes were sewn shut, thick black thread crossing the lids, binding them like a mouth forced shut. Her lips parted in a silent scream. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because the moment she stepped into the chapel, the mirrors shattered, all of them, leaving only shards that reflected what was inside rather than what stood before them. I looked into a broken fragment. And I saw myself. But not me. Something beneath the skin, clawing out. It whispered. You died once, Agatha. And you will die again. Until the truth forgets your name. Clara moved forward, dragging her hands along the stone floor. Each touch left blackened marks, as if she was wiping away the world itself. The seals are breaking, she said at last. He isn't the one you think. The door never closes. And every step you take, every prayer you speak, every breath, brings him closer. I tried to reach her. But she was already fading. A ghost stitched together from fear and warning. Her voice echoed from the shadows as she vanished. Remember the first time you died. Remember before the fire. Before the walls. Before the name. I'm left alone with the broken mirrors. Fragments scattered like broken promises. And a truth heavier than stone. I died once. Not in a fire. Not in illness. But here. In this place. Long ago. And I am still dying. That night, the convent sang. Not in voices we could hear. Not hymns or prayers. But something ancient, something beneath the stone and wood. It started as a low hum, barely felt beneath the soles of my feet. Like the earth itself was breathing a secret. I followed it down, through the cellar, past the sealed east wing, until I reached the crypt beneath the chapel. The floorboards there were loose, worn from centuries of feet. When I pried one up, the sound poured out, a choir, but not human. It was 1,000 voices layered like the whispers of graves. They didn't sing words. They sang names. My name. And others. Names I had never heard, yet felt buried deep in my bones. The choir grew louder. Not in volume, but in weight. As if the walls themselves began to hum in response. Then, beneath the choir, a voice rose. Soft. A whisper. It said one word. A name. Elijah. The choir faltered. Silence pressed against my ears like water. And then the voice came again. You were never hers. You are his. Bound by blood, sealed by stone. The floor trembled. And I realized, the past I thought was mine isn't mine at all. It's someone else's. I fled upward, slamming the floorboard back into place. But I'm already part of the choir now. A note in a song that never ends. The chapel was empty. Or so it seemed. Candles flickered in impossible patterns, casting shadows that twisted and writhed like living things. I found myself at the altar, clutching the torn missal page, its ink still damp, as if it had just been written. The words beneath the prayer were a name. Not his name. The name. I whispered it softly. And the air thickened, like the moment before a storm breaks. A veil lifted. Not from my eyes, but from the world itself. The figure beneath the veil appeared. Not the gentle savior I had prayed to. Not the kind face I had imagined in childhood. But something else. Eyes like empty wells. A mouth that smiled but never spoke. Skin pale as bone, stretched thin like parchment. He reached out, not with hands, but with shadows that seeped into me. His voice was everywhere and nowhere. You called me by my true name. Now you are bound. I tried to run. But the chapel had become a cage. Walls bleeding darkness. Floors shifting beneath my feet. I realized then, the third truth was not a gift. It was a curse. And I was its prisoner. The shadows whispered my name. Not with voices, but with memories, fragments of lives I never lived but knew too well. They crowded the chapel walls, sliding over the cracked plaster like living ink. You are the seal, they said. The gatekeeper. The broken circle. I sank to my knees, clutching my chest as the weight of all their stories pressed down. The faces of the forgotten, the lost sisters, the nameless souls, flashed before my eyes. You must choose, they said. To keep the door closed, you must forget. To open it, you must remember. I saw two paths. One led to silence and darkness. The other, to pain and truth. I understood then why Dolores was walled up alive. Why Clara had come back. Why the statue bled backward. It was never about salvation. It was about control. And now the choice was mine. To become the prison, or the key. The candlelight flickered once more, casting my shadow long and thin against the ancient stone. I reached out. And the door creaked open. The air was thick, tasting of earth and ash. I stepped through the doorway, the one I had kept sealed in my mind for so long. Beyond it was neither light nor dark. It was a place between places, a realm stitched from whispers and shadows. There, I saw him, not as savior, not as tyrant, but as everything and nothing. He spoke without sound. You were never meant to escape. I looked down and saw my hands, not flesh, but carved from stone. Not mine, yet still me. Then a memory shattered through the veil. I was the first seal, the first lost soul, the one who failed to close the circle. I had died before life, died so many times, only to awaken here, time and again, trapped between faith and oblivion. But now I understood. The third truth is the truth of cycles, endings that birth beginnings, and beginnings that bury endings. I was both the prisoner and the jailer. And in this waking dream, I chose to break the seal, to let the door remain open. The convent trembled. The statues wept black tears. And the choir began anew. A song without end. I am Agatha. And I am the threshold.